Hi, this is Sheila with Conscious Conversation Central, and today is Tuesday, April the 21st, 2020. And I'm joined today by my gal pal posse, BZ Rieger and Lisa Flameno Rush. Thanks, ladies, for coming. And BZ had a nudge for us, and she had a title too. We're going to talk about From Slavery to Sovereignty. Banish the fog of consent. And so I'm interested in a special course. You know, I've been on the train of standing in my own sovereignty and what that actually really means for me personally. And but be a little more clear for me on banishing the fog of consent, BZ. What do you mean?
Well, it's huge, and it depends where your perspective is, how wide your aperture of consciousness and looking at things is. So there's every being on the planet has been complicit in giving their consent to one thing or another. Although if you took a piece of that out and said, you know, you've given your consent to the slavery system, and you knew what a slavery system was, you'd go, what? No, you're nuts. So that's where the fog of and that's why it's consent is, because it's not implicit consent, it's not informed consent, it isn't explicit consent, so it's not any of those things, but it's consent nonetheless because of our behaviors, because of our propensity to do things or not do things. So not speak up, or not stand in our truth, or not notice how we're flowing in a particular moment, in a particular situation, in response to a particular thing that's going on. So a really good right this moment, there are really good things happening. Even if they're difficult, they're really good things happening that illustrate this fog of consent.
The word tacit is what's constantly coming to mind for me.
What's that?
The word tacit,
yes,
is what comes to mind for me in regards to this tacit consent.
Yes.
Yep. If we were to call it out to someone, to myself, when I first started looking into things, oh, well, I don't consent to that. Oh, but I have found that, oh, yes, apparently I was consenting to, and in a lot of cases still am consenting to quite a few things.
Right. Well, and the reason, or the play of how the title goes, which is not, it'll be another one of those things where we have a conversation that kind of breaks pieces of it, but we start with the second part first, even though it comes at the end of the title. One of the reasons I was asked to put it that way is because from slavery to sovereignty, you know, a lot of people, oh yeah, I know, don't want to be a slave, and I am sovereign, and
right.
Yes, that could be true. So that'll catch their attention to figure that out, and to pay attention, and to take time and all of the stuff going on to notice that. But until you banish the fog of consent, you can't actually be in your singularity, in your sovereignty, which is not about sovereign citizens or any of that kind of stuff. It's about the core and truth of who you are, where there is no right or wrong. There's only that neutrality. There's only that 0 point. And so when you banish the fog of consent, and you are fully in your knowing, you're fully in your consciousness, excuse me, then you can, no, it's not the beer thing, it's a macadamia nut that got stuck. um, then you're fully in, in that true north of you, that 0 point that can then let you navigate the other pieces. So that's, why it goes that way. So you could look at different things of what's the fog of consent. Well, if you're not noticing things and not reacting to them, just noticing them, then you can't actually highlight them for yourself and realize, oh, that's a piece. I noticed that, and that's a piece, and this actually go together because everything is connected.
Well, my sense of the title as to why your guidance brought it in as, in the way that it did, is that for for one thing, um most, and I know I for me, when you say to someone, well, you're a slave, the first thing is, well, no, I'm not. I live in the United States. We're a free country. And there's right. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot to it from the very beginning. There's
Yes.
there's the programming and conditioning even.
So just in that phrase, what you described, so you said, well, I say to someone that they say, well, no, we're in a free country, we live in the United States. Well, yeah, so go right to the second part of the title, which is banish the fog of consent. Because, I mean, that in itself is just a huge conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What I was nudged to actually, if we choose to play with it, is what's actually going on, and because it's again, it's starting with, you could say, the end in mind. You could say starting with what's here right now. So for example, the whole COVID-19 is top of mind for everybody in various different ways. Some are terrified about it, some are okay, give me a break about it, some are mixed, a combination of those things, some are, we're going to open up and all that kind of stuff. And so right now we're in the part of the scene of the play of the theater that is unfolding to unwind and unbind all of this, where the text for the stage setting have cued the fog machines so that we can more visibly see the fog of consent. We can go, what's that mist going along the scene here, where and slithering around these things, right? So that, because it's more, you amp that up, then you can see it and go, well, wow, what's that? The fog was always there, you just may not have been paying attention. And then you have, again, roles being played. It's all theater being played, and I mean that literally and figuratively. So you have one of the actors on stage, could be the governor of Virginia, and the whole thing about taking your arms away, or it could be the governor of Michigan, and seeds are, things of evil, right? Right. So you've got that, and you've got people reacting to the, just there's many examples. Those are not the only ones, but those are two examples, because I'm going to put a little more together with that. So people in those states are doing whatever they're doing. There's lots of different people in those states, and they're having lots of different reactions to it, and they're doing a different thing. So, but the fog is now, cue the fog machines in the state of Michigan and the state of Virginia. And so regardless of where you are in your thought about something, you're noticing about something, your consciousness level expansion about something, the fog machines are just pumping in tons of fog. So now it's unmistakable. You may not know what the heck that is, but you can see it. Okay, now cue another character in this scene, and that is the presser and the president. And he's pulling in some of the things he's tweeted. Reporters, cue them too. The reporters asking about, again, in their specific role, a snarky question like, are you inciting violence with your tweets of liberate? And he said that in 3 different states. So he said Virginia, he said Michigan, and he said Minnesota. And so in this scene, or it's not even those, because we're in the whole scene, and this is the last scene, but in this piece of the scene, he says, no, I'm just, tweeting what is so. And a lot of things have gone too far. A lot of things have rolled out too far, and people have been hurt or, really constrained too much. And so that's something to pay attention to. And the follow-up question, this has happened in many different exchanges, but the one most recent comes to mind in noodling this whole nudge around. Then the follow-up question to that from the character playing as the reporter says, well, then are you going to have a decree, a mandate that the governors, not do certain things, or in other words, so you mandating that governors can only do X, Y? No, absolutely not, because I can see it both ways. It makes sense both ways. Okay, so that's the scene set of the part of the scene that we're playing. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're moving from slavery to sovereignty and you're banishing the fog of consent, and you're thinking that, well, hey, Trump's going to save us because he's this great guy and God put him there, and it's the whole thing, and so we're just going to watch and wait, see what Trump does, and then we'll all kumbaya, and hey, because Q and Trump have got it all going on, and we're just going to wait till we get the memo and go do it. Okay. So if you're noticing in all of this playing, Trump is signaling how to see the fog of your consent, how to notice it, and then from your perspective, because and he's telling you that all the time, you're the only expert for you. You have to choose what is right for you. You've got to choose your slavery or sovereignty. You've got to choose your role. You've got to choose your actions. And he's giving you clues. The reporter says, well, you're inciting violence. No, I can see that. Are you putting a mandate on for all? No, because I can see it both ways. So someone just said, okay, well, I kind of get this up, but could you just say what you really want to say? Well, you have to figure it out for yourself. But what I can tell you, or highlight a little more clearly, is it's kind of like the cage door is open, but we've got to walk through it. Yeah. So one of the things that's being transmitted, conveyed, and reading Trump's body language and his energy and all that, he thinks he's being really clear, and a lot of people are not getting it yet, is, in other words, you've got to know there's this whole construct that's there, and forget about the evil doing and the Fauci and the this and that and the other thing. But do you even know what your rights are? Do you even know what he keeps saying? There's this beautiful thing called the Constitution. Do you even know what that says? Do you even know where you stand in that? Do you even know what is consentable, or like on the table of consent, and how you are in a fog and giving consent, right? In an explicit consent, right? Tacit consent. What's the difference? Where are you? So, because this is a multidimensional play, this is not a linear play. This is not a linear, bad guys do something, super Trump and super Q come fix everything, all the rest of us go yay, and it's not like that. There's multiple levels and layers, this way, this way, this way, every way it's multidimensional. And until we can step into that ourselves, it's an inside job. So he's telegraphing all of these different things in a myriad of different ways, and saying, do you want to, using my language, is, do you want to play with this? Do you want to play with noticing? Do you want to play with waking up? Do you want to play with being 100% responsible, accountable, and liable, being in your sovereignty to then declare, command, and give voice to what you do consent and what you don't, from a
Mhm.
conscious state.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot in this one for me, and there's I'm all already seeing a couple of other branched off conversations from this one. Um, uh, in part due to the fact that it is a multidimensional situation. For me personally, um, I when I first started these conversations, specifically with the two of you, uh, shortly after having met Heather and becoming involved in that,
Mhm.
I I I didn't understand it all. I still don't really understand it all. I could just feel, and I still do, that it is all of it is metaphor for the internal, which is the multidimensional in every aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, I can see, sense, and feel, even though I still don't understand all of the 3D implications of all of Heather's work, of all of what Trump is doing. Because make no mistake, as far as I'm concerned, he's very, we've had those conversations before too. Um, and for me, none of it makes any sense without that spirituality piece, uh, that knowing for me that it is all about the one and the singular and the sovereign piece. And again, make no mistake, not sovereign citizen. That's an oxymoron. It doesn't exist. That gets under my craw when people try to throw that out, because that's still happening. Um, and none of what's happening makes any 3D sense to me without that piece.
It doesn't.
Without the knowing that it is multidimensional in every feel sense of that word, the layers and all of that together. There's no way for me to make any sense out of any of this without that. I can't. Uh,
Right. Yeah.
did you have something you wanted to add, Lisa? Because I know a lot of
Yeah.
times.
Something was coming in from you when she was talking at the end there, BZ. You were saying about the and it wants to leave. I've been really having a hard time hanging on to it. So hang on a second. It wants to depart. Now hold on, it's coming back. I'm so funny. um, okay. It for me, one story I just wanted to tell, and I'm not sure where it fits or why or anything, but it keeps coming up. So I'm just gonna share it. Um, I realized this is about our being um, complicit, our own complicity in it, and how I came to that awareness for me was I was feeling very disempowered by everything I was looking at. Anything I saw, I felt as though everything was upside down, inside out, backwards, totally wrong. And I felt powerless to do a bloody thing about it. Because even trying to call it to somebody's attention, well, nobody can see it. And if they did, that would change everything. So, and in reality, it really didn't. And so in the end, I had a friend keep asking me, well, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? So I decided to answer that question. Yeah, what am I going to do about it? And what I was shown was that everything that I was hating so desperately, because let's be clear, I was hating with desperation everything I was not unhappy with. I wasn't happy with that's not supposed to be here. That's the way I was holding it. um, and in reality, I was supporting all of those things. I was me. And it had to be shown to me, and it took a long time, because I was very entangled. Like, for instance, I'm going to say this. I definitely was putting the power for my health, and I'm going to say not only power, but responsibility for my health and well-being squarely on the shoulders of the system. The doctors, the nurses, the hospitals, the educated folks who know everything.
The experts.
Yep, the experts. That's right.
Experts, yes.
Yes. And in reality, they only have that power because I gave it to them, not because it's real in any way. Like, they don't know something I don't know, and it's not because that's the divine right of things, like that's how things are, because that's not right either. That's all of it works against nature, not with it. So why, the question became, do I continually support this? Because without my support, it goes away. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, there's only one of me, mine, but when I withdraw my support to this system, or now I'd even call it an interlooper, I regain the power that I was feeding it. Mm-hmm. So I benefit greatly. I now am free from it. I don't need it to survive. I don't feed it. So it simply has nothing to do with me anymore.
Well,
and that's just one tiny angle, because so many things that I was railing against, I was very busy energetically supporting.
Well,
and I was very foggy about it. So I had to throw that in.
That's a really big one right there, Lisa. And it's actually quite, because I heard a whole bunch of people with the shock a little bit there.
Okay.
But it's a big part of it. And as we know, I mean, I've shared a couple of times that was a very large part of my own systematic awakening, if you will. All right. Having been so terribly ill, and I'm going to use it like that because that's a very good place to start in regards to taking responsibility for oneself, because and it actually dovetails with the COVID-19 quite lovely at this point, because there's a lot going on right now in regards to comorbidities and what that actually is, because there's a whole bunch of people like, well, what the hell is that? And just to be very clear, that's folks with underlying conditions and or in poor health to begin with. And so that is part and parcel of the responsibility in which I finally stood up and took a hold of for myself. Because and I can say this, I was on 14 medications at one point daily. Now it's not, I mean, that was different medications, not 14 different ones throughout the day. If you counted them all up, there was a shit ton more than that. I'm talking about 14 separate different ones that I had to take 4 times a day for this one, 3 times a day for this one. I had a whole system, okay, and all of that, right? Because I had put the responsibility for keeping me alive in someone else's hands. Oh, God forbid I should, oh, I don't know, watch what I was doing, putting in my body and take care of
Right.
my own health.
Yeah, I'd do anything except take responsibility and care for myself. That was
Right.
a little bad.
And so that's a really good example that you brought in right there, because there's a whole plethora. And I realize that there's older folks that are all caught up in this too. But make no mistake that that is a very big thing. You know, I'm gonna eat Doritos and lay around and have hot dogs and all kinds of dead stuff to eat all day long. The Cheetos were one of my faves, and you know, but you know, but that's okay, because you know the docs, they got me over here.
Yep.
And so yeah, that is a very good example. And um it, there's not a lot of folks, and I get it, that are any too concerned about what they're putting in their own bodies in regards to that. And that is a matter of responsibility that only the person putting it in the mouth actually has any control over.
That's correct.
Right. And one thing I'm really nudged to point out here, well, a couple things is maybe I'll start with this one because it goes to the energy. It's all about the frequency. So when Lisa was giving her story, she said a friend said, well, what are we going to do about it? Not, hey, well, let's figure out, roll up our sleeves, what are we going to do about it? It was more of, well, you know, we're just small. That wasn't the words, but you know,
But
we're
yes,
powerless. What are
yep.
we? What can we do? We just have to go to work. We just have to go along and get. Okay, right there. That's the fog of consent,
Yep.
and that's going with it. So
Yep.
it's also part of the beautiful design. I mean, if you notice all the intricacies and all of the nuance and all the things that's now in all this unraveling and unwinding and unbinding, it's stunningly beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
The complexity and the nuance that has gone into this whole false construct. So just in that one example, so you set up mechanisms, you set up training, you set up programming, you set up devices, you set up um, health things, you set up food, you set up circumstances, you set up routines, you set up all those kinds of things, and they're
It was
all
thorough.
beautifully intertwined and connected.
Work
So
together.
you
Oh,
get
no.
someone who's saying, well, what are we going to do about it? You know, right? So again, this person is so far removed from the truth of who they are that if they just stopped for a moment and paused and took a deep breath, that would make a huge difference, earth-shattering difference in their world, just in that 1 nanosecond that it felt. But again, because everything doves together, because everything is connected, they don't see that. So that's one of the things I wanted to point out. The other thing is that yes, the food you eat, water you drink or don't, food you eat or don't, the quality of the food you eat or don't, the chemical nature, the organicness, are all very important. But it's not in isolation, and it's not the lead factor,
No,
because
you're
Right.
right.
you can eat
Right. And like I said, it's all connected and it's in everything.
yes, and the main thing it starts with is you, which is your energy frequency. So you can eat the most gorgeous, you know, grown around nothing else, no carbon, no nothing, no this, that, within eons distance to it, right? But if your frequency is holding, well, it's only this is right,
Yep.
That's bad. And only this is good for you. And that's this. And only, fluffy bunnies and not that, whatever it is, you're holding the frequency. It doesn't matter what you consume,
Right.
because you're actually consuming that negative, constricted, tight energy frequency the whole time. And just putting a cherry or a strawberry or an organic avocado on top of it, and you're not doing anything to alleviate that frequency. So I think that's a lot of the fog that people are not noticing of their consent to that,
Yeah.
and
Well,
how
I
you
feel
move
like you're
through it.
exactly correct there, BZ. But for me personally, it was uh it was a huge step, and
Yeah.
it was the one that I personally had complete 100% control of without any other being, because I was the only one who was opening my mouth and putting the pills in.
Yes.
I was the one opening my mouth and putting the food in. And for me, speaking of fog,
Which also stemmed from the fact that you weren't thinking for you,
no,
because otherwise you wouldn't have been doing those things. Someone else told you that's what you needed to do. And so that's why you were doing it.
no,
I know
exactly.
I was.
No, you're exactly correct. And in my particular case, there was a crap ton of fog, brain fog.
Right?
I couldn't think clearly. That was a
Can't
big
see anything clearly.
no, no. So I'm very grateful actually to all of those beings that contributed to all of that, because to be clear, I put myself in that position
Mhm.
to begin with. And I had to get to understanding that for myself. And so that too has a lot to do, in my view, in regards to what we're speaking on here.
Yes, absolutely. And
Um,
so take that, what I would say, take that wider, take that to the, it's interesting because it's health, whether you got the COVID, the beer thing, the
I
health
love it.
now, and the sovereignty now of, we
Well,
free ourselves from the slavery system, all that kind of stuff. Okay, great. So right in this moment, in not only the United States, but I'll just start with the United States, of different versions of stay at home orders or constriction or that kind of stuff. And
yeah.
so where is one noticing that fog, and your consent to it, and how things are, well, it's good to be safe, or we got to do with it, it's just for a little while, okay. But if you're watching, and again, this is playing out, and make no mistake, this is way, 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 way beyond the whole COVID-19, just as a simple thought. The president of the United States, the Republican and the Democrat, it's way beyond that. What's happening is, because we're in a battle from a linear aspect, from a non-linear aspect, from a more widened aperture of consciousness, that's not exactly the case at all. In fact, that couldn't be further from the truth. But in the linear, I'm just talking about the linear 3D, we're in a huge battle. And it's
Oh, yeah.
a physical battle. It is an energetic battle with serious ramifications,
Yep.
and it's a spiritual battle. So it is all of those things combined together. And in that setting, it's not just, it's far beyond some governor, some supposed um, authority figure taking your rights away, and you're going, whoa, what, excuse me? Where that's been happening all along, you just never notice it. Now the fog, like I said, the cue of the fog machines, and the fog has gotten so thick, you're going, what is that stuff, right? And because this is the time where the coalesced polarities of the frequency, we as a collective are choosing for the final time which way we're going with. Because we've talked a lot about how fear is the greatest way to deplete your immune system. Yes.
Yep.
But also on the immune system, on the energetic body, on the whole consciousness body, just to use as metaphors, right? Because in this very polarized frequencies of service to self or service to others, polarized negatively, polarized positively, polarized constrictively, polarized expansion, right? So you can, in those things, in this moment, we are choosing, do we want to move forward to expansion, or are we somehow going to, and this is the, in quotes, consent to, obviously not consciously, a lot of people, into letting us flow into negatively polarized, constricted thing, because they're waiting for that. They're doing everything they can actively do to swing that side. They what they don't know, which is the delicious cosmic irony, is they're not gonna pull it out. They're not gonna pull it out to the stuff. But from, if you're on the linear, tangible, locked in your house, and the whole the whole thing from the Wizard of Oz and the marching coming down, you'll experience that real time, and you'll get all the flavor and all the richness and all the cinematography thing that goes with that. Make no mistake about that, because this is the time to choose. So someone said, okay, please do it really linear for a minute. So for example, when the whole exchange that I started with comes up of Trump saying, tweeting 3 different tweets: liberate Virginia, liberate Michigan, liberate Minnesota, and then the reporter coming on scene asking about that. In that moment, it would be accurate to say that Trump is source. You are bringing source through the vehicle of Trump to you to say, you need to choose. You need to notice what's going on for yourself, and you need to choose. If you don't like this, what do you choose? Do you just not like this? Or I choose this? And that's where we are. You must consciously command and give voice to, in a demonstrable, assertive, not a belligerent way, not out of these rap asses, because that's the same frequency as what you're saying you don't want. So if you command this in a way, it's coming from full-throated, wholehearted, open-hearted. There's nothing to fear, because you're the one who's captaining the ship. It simply is so. You say it and it's so.
I don't know why, but apparently Dune is around me right now in a big way. And you've said it a couple of times, so I'm going to say it. Here's a quote from Frank Herbert's Dune.
Okay.
I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Only I will remain. I am. Only I am will remain in each singularity and the collective of I am.
Right.
So to finish that question that somebody asked, or the request somebody asked, in this part of the scene, Trump is saying that, yeah, I get it, you don't like what's happening, and yeah, I get it, you don't like someone saying you can't buy seeds, or we're going to take your guns away, or whatever it else is. I get that. Absolutely.
get
And
worse.
you're absolutely right. And I agree with you. And I also get in the construct of the Constitution, it's the states have the choice to do that. I get that. But who is it all for? Who is all of that predicated upon? The states and the federal government and this, that, and the other thing. Who is that predicated upon? You. We the people. So where is your voice? Where is your exercising your sovereignty? Where is your direct command of turning off the fog machine and giving your consent? If you don't like what's going on, and again, it's not in the old way of being belligerent or coming with arms. It's not about any of that kind of stuff, because you have we talked about this before, you have the most powerful howitzer, the most powerful silver titanium, werewolf killing bullets, right? If you want to use the might and force, you have that, and it's right here. And it's in the heart, it's in the love, it's in that neutrality, it's in that 0 point, it's in that standing fully in the true north of who you are and commanding it forward. Nothing, absolutely nothing is more powerful. There is no force, there is no weapon, there is no virus, there is no shot, there is no anything that is more powerful than is what is inside of you. And these are the moments one must take and realize and stand up to it yourself in the truth of that, because it will mow down, thwart, it will absolutely annihilate anything else. But it won't do it unless you do it. He can't do it for you. She, whoever it is, whatever pronoun you want to use, they can't do it for you. You've got to give force. And this is why I talked about this moment, this last pitched battle in this, because, and many people have heard it before, the separation of worlds. We're in that moment of choosing, and it will go the way that people have chosen or designed it to. They can change the design in any nanosecond. It doesn't, you can come in with one design and change it, but it only will change because you want it to. And you have to do it. You have to actually put action into it. You have to actually put energy into it. You have to actually give real, full-throated, wholehearted, loud, commanding consent to, in an explicit, clear, tangible, demonstrable, touchable way. And someone said, how? Well, that will be different for every being. It can look like a lot of different things, and we can go through what it might look like, but that will be different for everyone. And
it's achieved by all through fierce dedication to your frequency. You command everything through your frequency, which is your focus and attention. And only you have command of your focus and attention. So that is how.
Well, there's a whole segment that I can feel in this conversation that are much like where I have been and sometimes still find myself. And that is the intellectual exercise portion of being a creator being.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I create my own reality. I get that. Well, getting it up here is one thing, but getting it within the entire vessel is a wholly other thing. And that's really kind of what this is predicated on, because as long as you're kind of, oh, well, yeah, but they, and oh, yeah, exactly. I
understand.
Yeah.
And so, up until that piece is actually become an alchemical epiphany for
Yes.
one. That is a large portion of this. It is what. And listen, I thought there was a whole lot of stuff I thought I had. Well, I did. I had it up here, and there are still things that are for me, and I will freely admit that,
Yeah.
especially now that I
Don't
know
be,
that's a real thing.
well, and it's important to freely admit that, because you cannot release or change something you don't acknowledge. So the most important step, at least for me, is to just acknowledge what is and be okay with it. Just allow it to be. Because until then, I have no power over it.
Right.
I've given it all my power. It's now bigger than me. Ah,
Right.
Yeah, and
really.
one thing I think is really helpful this moment to put in there, um, to dovetail to what Lisa just said, is that that's absolutely so, especially when you're in the linear, especially when you're not in touch with and connecting to and living through, experiencing through your multidimensionality. So if you're just in, just on the plateau of the linear, of the, all this beer thing, this, that, that's going on, right?
Yeah.
Step back for a moment, even if you're just, like pretending to step back for a moment. That's cool. Step back for a moment. You're a creator being. You are multidimensional. You are a creator being. It's just fact. It's actually a fact of the true source sense. It's fact.
Mhm.
And we came here not only to experience embodiment and to go forth and know source and all that kind of stuff, and we do it individually because that's how source knows source, because source is all. So source is all. Source better have an army of alls going to get it all from every all thing that ever has thought of, been thought of, will thought of, is going to be thought of, so on and so on, right? Okay.
Okay.
When you can step back from just the linear in just these moments, and yes, these are very important moments, because since there's only now, right?
Mm-hmm.
This moment affects everything that's ever come before, that's ever gone in tangentially, that ever will come before, that's ever even thought of, that's going to potentially come into possibility to come into thing. It's all happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
A simpler way or a more linear way to say that is when we look at right this moment and we remember. So this is where we fully lock in to a knowing exercise and not an intellectual exercise of being a
Right.
creator being. This is what we do. We create, we dive. This is expansion. We're frequency, and we want to expand that frequency. We want to expand it in all its permutations. And the only way that that can happen is if we direct it and choose it. And right now we're at the new stages of the game, the new heights. So in collapsing fully, completely, collapsing the old false construct, and at the same time, right, we're having the real big bang of this new, totally new thing where it's full consciousness in embodiment, no piece of data missing, in all of our multidimensional aspects simultaneously right there. And in order to get that, to have that happen in this moment for each being, and it doesn't, some beings are choosing, I don't want that for a couple millennia, right? And some beings are saying, I absolutely want that right now, and I will do whatever it takes to do that. And some beings are saying, I want that, but they're not willing to do whatever it takes. And so that will never occur for them, right? Because they're in a fourth dimensional offshoot, because they're not willing to do that. And that offshoot will just go until it finally collapses. It won't exist anymore. It'll go back into the super source.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the moment that we're at. That's why things seem so some beings can go through and watch what's going on, pay attention to what's going on, and feel absolutely no sense of chaos, no sense of worry. In fact, when they stop for a minute and think about it and go, well, why don't I feel chaotic? And why am I not worried at all about this? Because that's that source rising. It's that knowingness. They may not understand it. They may not be able to, enumerate. They may not be able to certainly describe it to somebody else who's going, oh my God, we gotta hurry, oh my God, whatever it is, right? But there isn't. And then there's some who, no matter what, it's not only the boogeyman, but it's the boogeyman squared and quadrupled and morphed and, whatever. And it just keeps coming. And it's that total amplification of all that. And they stop and go, well, why is that? I mean, everything seems scary and everything seems, it's failing, it's not working, it's breaking, people are dying. And I don't mean just from COVID, just everything seems to be going wrong in all iteration. I got a paper cut, the car doesn't work, I got this, from the littlest to the tiniest to the biggest, right?
Right.
Because they're on a roll, they're in that frequency.
Yeah.
It's actually
in fast and furious now.
It's
momentum,
folks.
folks.
The three world split of consciousness, and it's beyond bifurcation. It's the multiforcation of these kinds of things, because the multidimensionality is dividing off in how people are choosing for themselves. Nothing is being done to anybody.
Well, what you're describing there, BZ, is someone who isn't aware that they are a creator being, and they are continually creating. We all continually create in every moment of every now. We do, whether we know it or not, believe it or not, that's what we are doing. And so what you're describing there is someone who is creating all of that for themselves. And here is where, for me anyway, that the responsibility comes in. Mm-hmm. I had to be responsible enough to stand up and say, okay, wait a minute, hold up. Because I gotta, like we've talked about before, when for me, the realization that I created my situation with my ex-husband was so plain and so right there in my face. There was no more denying it for me. No more denying of it. And so, but apparently that's what was required for me to finally get that memo. Now, even though I got that memo, even though I got it and I got it up here, and for the most part, I walk that way in my everyday moment. So yeah, I sometimes forget that, the frequency I carry is creating this or that or the other, and things start coalescing. Oh, wait a minute, I pulled that in. So
let me do a programming note right here. I want to pin this right here.
Okay.
Go back to what I said. Beautifully said, Sheila. Go back to what I said a moment ago, being really strongly nudged to put this in, about being creator beings, about expansion, about this is what we do. This is adventures in all ways, shape, and form. It's not all fluffy bunny adventures all the time.
Nope.
Right?
Nope.
Okay. So someone was saying, well, that I would never do that. That's not true. Because yes, as a creator being, you would do that, because that's how you have an expansion. If you are source, right? So let me just play this for a minute. See if we can get consent from the two of you and then others listening. So is it fair to say that source is eternal and unlimited? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And that source is all things and no things? Yes.
Yes.
So now source, and I'm going to take it to the down. So source is coming, is in you. And so from source's perspective, which you just said, is all things and no things, unlimited and all, right? Yeah. So source is into you. From source's perspective, Are you unlimited?
Yes.
So are you all things and no things?
Yes.
And eternal?
Yes.
And all?
Yes.
Okay, great. So now from Lisa and Sheila's perspective, you may hold it that you're absolutely the pipeline, which is everything is unlimited. It doesn't have a certain diameter, is flowing, and you would say the same. Yes, it's in the same. Or you might say, well, kind of, yes here, absolutely not, or no, I'm small, or if you're full on a religious indoctrination, no, that's God, and God's got it, and we have their humble servants, and okay. So that's what I'm talking about, perspective there. So when Sheila was saying, I created it, right? And I've noticed I've created it, and I don't like that I've created it, but I noticed that, right? So when someone says, well, I wouldn't do that, because of the narrow constrictive focus, the propensity is, if it's bad, then I couldn't possibly create it. If I'm taking responsibility, then you're saying I should take responsibility for the fact that my life is shit, and you're making me wrong, you're making me bad, you're making me no. This is what the post-it note, this is what the pinning it right here is. No, that's the furthest thing from what I'm saying, what Sheila's saying, what Lisa's saying. Absolutely couldn't be further from what we're saying. Because you're not small as a creative being. So adventure and expansion is how you rock, how you roll. So there is no good or bad to what, in the linear perspective, from the narrow constricted focus perspective, is being labeled as good or bad. It's energy, it's data, it's an experience. And yes, I may step aside of my wide aperture to my linear going, well, I get it over here, man. I get it. I get that I'm powerful. I get that I created this. I get that this is amazing expansion. And from over here, I'm going, it was a really bad idea to do this, and I really don't like it. And I have to tell you, I'm really pissed off about this, or I'm terrified, or whatever. Yes, there is no contradiction between those two things. Yes. I can stand over here, and I've spent a lot of my 56 years over here going, what? And I can stand over here and go, yeah. That's why I want to pin this here. When you can, for a moment, even if you don't fully integrate it on a knowing level, and it's just an intellectual exercise over here, then you let go of the right or wrong, because that's the Jeez, my brain is not working to my lips here. That's the polarized view of something.
Yeah.
And that's the constricted, down and dirty in thing. And right this moment, we used to be able to do that. We can't do that anymore, because all the frequencies have changed. Every part of our bodies, all of the different bodies, mental, emotional, electromagnetic, right, has all changed significantly enough, even in those who haven't changed that much comparatively to other beings, right? It's all changed significantly enough that the playing field now for every being, and to lesser and greater extents, but for every being, the baseline now is multidimensionality. Whether you know it or not, understand it or not, believe it or not, doesn't matter. And so that's what I'm saying, where why that pin right there is very important. So then when Sheila's talking about, and she left out the words, but this, marriage was shit, and this was hurting me, and this was, upsetting, or this was awful, or this was great in some things, right? All those kinds of things. And she's at the same time saying, and I created that. Yes, absolutely so. And that's beautiful. So whether it's the fluffiest bunny or the sharpest steak or anything in between, it's all, wow, cool, great. Because when you can come in your linear brain that processes things in a polarized, compartmentalized, linear thing, and your brain has now shifted enough, and you steering that brain, so the brain working in an adjunct to the heart and the heart brain, right? When it comes in as the second in command. So you're number one. If you're Star Trek, right? You know, got the captain and his number one, right? So when it comes in that respect, then you can see how beautiful that piece of data is. The piece of data is vile and disgusting and filthy and horrendous. And that data comes in and you can negotiate, integrate, expand from, I'm talking about energy and your whole expansion as a soul from that piece of data, the way I just described it, and go, beautiful, great, excellent. I can see it. I can integrate it. I can parse all those pieces out. The same way you can integrate when you're looking at a piece of data that's, it's soft and it's cuddly and it's a puppy and it's kissing my face and it has puppy breath and it's wonderful. And look at the fun and look at the joy and look at that little being is learning how to be in a puppy body. And hey, my tail does this, and my paws do this, and all that kind. Look at the bug, look at the butterfly, and you know, right? There's no difference between those. It's only the linear, narrow, constricted focus that categorizes one as one thing and one as another. The real categorization is one frequency, which has certain components and bandwidth and levels that the frequency would then turn, that has a propensity to turn into physical things in one way as another way. Not good or bad. It's all energy. And once you can play with the energy, and we all can, and once we start to master that, we can put components of that in, because we're not going to, well, we're staying right here, we're not going anywhere, but we're not becoming this thing that is no polarization. We're having a thing because we're not making that jump in the physical bodies right this moment to beyond that. In 5-6D, there is still some polarization, and we'll do a whole conversation there, but it's complementary. So it might be love and light, which are not the same things, but they're complementary. So there's a little bit of give and take, right? You know, there might be sunshine and not full sunshine, right? You know, partly sunny, partly cloudy, all those kinds of things. So there isn't such a diametrically opposed to, like I was talking about over here, is this example and this example. And we're letting that go, but we can't let it go until we let it go.
No, exactly right.
The president can declare, okay, letting it go. I just wrote an executive order. It's EO, you know, star 777, whatever it is, right? We have to do that. And that's what we're seeing playing out. And how are we choosing to do that?
Yeah, well, what you were sharing there for me is it's a matter of perspectives, right? So in the midst of all of that I very clearly had created for myself, it didn't feel good. It was, you know, and all of that. But now, removed from that, and I'm certain that most everyone can look back at something in their life and see, well, you know what, that was horrific, but wow, that had to happen, and actually it turned out to be the best thing ever in my life.
Right.
And so that happens a lot with folks. It's whether or not once that perspective has been reached, what we kind of take from that, you know.
How we integrate it.
Did somebody do it to me, or did I do that to myself? I set, and quite frankly, I've said this before. Now I know that, and I've had, and we all have had horrific things happen to us in our life. There's been abuse, there's physical, sexual, you know, just verbal, all kinds of stuff that almost every being on this planet has been through.
Yes.
But I will say this, no matter how you slice it, I feel much more empowered to know that I am the one that set up all of that for my own benefit. That is way more empowering to me than to sit here and say, he did that to me. And that is not so. And I don't know, for whatever the reason, um, I don't know. I just know within my own being that coming to that knowledge. I mean, it's like it's freeing. Talk about going from slavery to sovereignty.
Right.
I set it all up. I'm the one in control of all that. And yeah, no, it wasn't all that easy. But as an eternal, for me, knowing that I am an eternal being, um, I got a feeling I have done much worse and been much worse and have experienced much worse than what I have in this particular incarnation.
Yes, everyone has. That's that going forth no source. So you're going out, and as you go out, you could look at it as you could go like this. You're going down in your um, your right and wrongness. However, it's not accurate at all. But you could go down, you go out, right? So you go out, and that's why when people say, well, these bad people, these evil people, and I'm not saying that what they've done in different things um, is okay and is good. That's not at all what I'm saying. So
No.
try to
No.
refrain from putting words in my mouth. um, but in that moment, what they've done, what I'm talking about is where, and I did it in the little consent piece, do give and don't give, is that just as you were saying, Sheila, there's things you've done much. So you go out and you make the choice. So the light seeps in, even there's this tiny, tiny speck that you couldn't see with your visible, your naked eye, that speck of light, and it creeps in and you make different choices. You make different choices and you make different
Mm-hmm.
choices. So now you're starting to turn around, you make different choices. So yes, each being has been played the evilest of the evil. And the reason that you're, newsflash, this is your proofing of this. The reason that you know that is because you're on this planet in this moment where this is ground zero for all of Source's multiverses of what's going on. And you're playing this role of having a more open heart or being fully open heart, wherever you are in your own choosing of that. Because you came from that and you had the training and you had the shift and you had the integration and you have the knowing and you understand it and you can recognize it and you can see it. And you've turned your own ship from eons that you were doing that. And now you're here because this is your mission. Because who better equipped for, knows the ins and outs for, has the fortitude for, to bring all of this down and unwinding and unbinding than those who had the biggest daggers. And I mean, think of it, forget multidimensional, forget everything else, just go from basic linear logic. If you want a team, you're going to call in the experts. You're going to call in the ones who recognize all the moves, who know all of the tells, who know all of the tricks, right? That's who you're going to have
Who
on your
invented them.
that's who you're going to have on your team. And that's what's going on right now.
Well, believe me, I have no desire to remove anyone's wishes to remain a victim or to remain in fear. Everybody gets to choose. That's my new mantra is every being gets to choose. That's the entire point of this existence, actually. The whole idea behind incarnating in a physical vessel is a specific perspective, a specific point of conscious source having its own singular experience. So everybody gets to choose. And, no sweat off of me if that's the way you wish to play. I just wanted to be real clear about that. Because, there was a point in time, apparently I wanted to play the victim too. The poor, downtrodden, abused person. It served some sort of purpose. Otherwise, I would never have done that. The reason I had to add this is because I heard a chorus of voices that said, well, I would have never chosen that. Oh, well, okay. You get to choose if you want to keep yourself in the denial and in the dark about that. Again, that's your choice. I know for myself that I did. Absolutely. And for me, that's just a way more empowering place to even begin any of these conversations from.
Yes, everybody is the expert for themselves. There is no other expert for them.
Right.
And one of the ways that I play with it, if someone's asking me something, well, give me your advice. Well, I don't give advice, but I can tell how I dealt with something if it was similar to that. And that's only my experience. And if there's anything that you can glean from that, great. And if you can't, great. And I don't mean, well, great, sucks for you, screw that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying absolutely, that's great, because in that take something or not take something, it means that you're consciously, and that's the thing, you're consciously going, yes, that piece fits for me, or absolutely nothing fits for me, but I see this now. So it was perfect, because I don't know what's right for you. I'm not you. Right?
Well, something just came in for me in regards to the banishing the fog of consent. Okay. Is that I heard someone say, well, I'm not consenting to any of what's happening right now. And you actually alluded to earlier how some of the things that the president has been saying in regard that it is my personal feeling, my observation that what is happening in these moments of now is that not only is every being choosing in every moment, because that's just a given, but in these moments of now, it feels very clear to me that not only are you able, now it's more like all becomes transparent now, is so vivid. It's more of what I see happening on that stage is actually a facilitation, if you will, by the president for those who maybe aren't viewing this in the way that might be helpful to them, because it is not just a multidimensional issue, but it's actually a clarity issue. I think I don't know if we did this on camera or not, but there was a while there where some of the questions from the reporters that were being asked, I would look at Lisa and say, why isn't he saying anything about the Constitution? He can't. They're trying to make him responsible for this, that, or the other regarding the states, and he can't do that. It's not his job. It's the states individually. And I get it now. That was exactly the reason I feel that it wasn't being said at that point. He did.
Yes, listen to the word, right? When you just said
Yes.
states. So states of consciousness. It's the decision of the states of consciousness that have to decide. He can't do anything for you. One has to do it for him, for yourself.
Yep. So I wanted to bring that in there in regards to the consent, because it is part of it. I feel all the players are being invited to show themselves as to who they truly are.
Yeah, and I mean, I talk about it a lot, the non-interference clause. Well, he's got the same thing right up there. People have got to make their choices.
Yeah.
And so now it's just in this fevered, frenzied, dramatic, you can use all different words to describe depending on what your perspective of it is, to highlight it for you to choose.
Well, yes, because there is still in a lot of the different communities, there's still a waiting game. We're following. I'll put this is in the queue. The queue thing for me is we're waiting for Q and that team or whatever and what all. Right.
Somebody.
Right. Somebody do something.
Power outside of yourself.
Exactly.
So you as the expert is choosing power. Good on you. That's perfect, because for you, that's the way that and that's beautiful.
Yep. It's however you
absolutely
choose.
beautiful, because you are consciously choosing power outside of yourself, and that's the way you want to experience. You want to say, you're saying, well, hey, let me take this a little bit further. Let me dive in a little deeper. Let me pretend I'm small a little longer, and seeing what are the different permutations that I can get to unfold for me, because I want to experience that, because I'm that good. This is what I do. I eat the highs and the lows, the in-betweens for breakfast. This is what I do. This is fun. I'm a creative being. This is what I do. This is fun. Right?
Yeah.
And it's nobody's job. It's nobody's business to get in the way of someone else doing the thing. At the same time, that's why the borders are a metaphor for the borders around a country. Actually, interestingly enough, the distancing, social distancing is another border for you to then get used to what's your space, what's your control of it, and in that you are sovereign, in that you rule supreme, and in that, when you're consciously doing it, then you change and affect everything. And when you're not consciously doing it, then you change and affect everything in a completely different way. And that's part of the playing and the learning. It's none of it is wrong and none of it is right. It's your own choice.
Yep. That's absolutely so. Now, don't get me wrong, because I did hear a couple of people go, don't get me wrong. There's some 3D linear stuff in there. Absolutely. That, what it was is in regards to the social distancing. There's a lot in all of these, but in this particular conversation, in speaking in what we are speaking about, it has more to do with, in my view anyway, more to do with the energetics and the multidimensionality than the 3D. Because yes, there are a lot of underlying conditions.
We could absolutely have just a purely linear, purely based, purely linear conversation that takes all multidimensionality, all the truth of who you are, all the power of who you are, all the capability, beauty, masteryship that you have right there out of the equation. It would be a very hard conversation for me to do, but we could do it. I could go New York linear on you, full throttle, and we could do that. We could talk about that, no problem. But I want to play with where we are and what's really happening, because this whole coronavirus is just the tip of 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 the few shavings in the tip of the pile of shavings of the iceberg. And if you're finding that there's some chaos and consternation and malleabilityness affecting you, buffeting you now, well, strap in, because this is boring, this is slow, and you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah.
Oh, we've been sitting through the coming attractions, you mean?
Just the thought of that makes me a little dizzy.
Yeah.
Right. So it's April 21st. Can you even remember what the world was like on May 13th? He had a big presser there where the state of emergency had already been passed, and now, all the stay-at-homes were starting to go in order. So April, we'll say March 13th to April 21st. Can you even remember what the world was like? It's gone. And so that seems like really short. Or really fast. It's happening in a glacier speed. But don't worry, because it's going to speed up for real. Beyond light speed.
Well, it does feel like light speed already. So you're right about that. It's just there's so much that it's almost hard to keep. I mean, really.
Yeah, and the thought of this new, or this, or did you hear this, or this happened, or this revelation, or wow, this truth is being talked about, or oh, they're signaling this. Yes, absolutely, positively. It's still slow.
Yeah.
We haven't even gotten to barely a stride of a fast stride yet.
Yeah. Well.
Well, we kind of waited a long time. We, the collective.
Well, that's true.
Again, we chose this. We created this. We got this.
Yes, we are doing this now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cosmically delicious. To me, it couldn't be more beautiful, more amazing, more nuanced, more sublimely delicious. I do occasionally have a linear thought of, maybe I should contain myself. Maybe I shouldn't, be smoking.
Yeah, no, don't do that. Please. We're done with the containing.
Yeah, there'll be no containing over
Let
here.
it all out, lady. It's time.
But yeah, it's, and what's to come is just spectacular. And to be revealed is, again, however you label it, if you want to label it, it's just spectacular.
Yeah. Wow. No, you're right. And there'll be no containing over here, by the way.
Yay.
In case.
Yes, I think others are learning that contain as they try to might around over here is just not working.
No, it really isn't. And anymore, the more you try to contain a thing, it's just going to blow up in your face. I feel like if it's not about, coming together and creating peace and harmony with all that you're interacting with, I just feel like the energetics are so that you will harm yourself before you can even harm another at this juncture, really. Pretty soon you won't even be able to hold the thought. And, it's getting closer and closer to that moment, really.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I know.
Absolutely. Well, it's easy to see that source is rising within all beings. Again, whether they know it or not, believe it or not, all of that, it's happening.
Yeah, it's happening.
Yeah.
Yes, in all, and again, I'll highlight that in all beings, no matter one's perceived labeling or siding that they would ascribe to them, all beings.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up in that way too, BZ, because for me, what a lot of the unbinding and unwinding is, in my view anyway, is the programming and conditioning, and labeling is a part of that. That's one of the things that every one of us who have had children, and we were children ourselves, so even if you don't have children, that's one of the first things. That's how we were all taught. That's how we were taught to speak. That's how we were taught to recognize things. So that in and of itself is something that is at least being, because we still have to be able to when looking at something, distinguish it, right? So there will still be labeling, but opening oneself up to understanding isn't the right word. I'm going to use grok here. The fact that, uh, well, okay, uh, this is called, it's labeled a pin, but it's so much more than that. And that is so with every single thing. And just coming to that
Mhm.
is can be very helpful, so that when one is looking at anything, the propensity to label, and especially with the good and bad,
Yeah.
good versus evil, light versus dark. I've said many times, I call myself a dark worker. It came for me the other day why that is.
Okay.
Because my job, specifically for me, is to find all the darkness that resides within me and integrate it, love it into the wholeness of what I am.
Mhm.
I'm going to carry light and be light always. So, and I can't offer anyone else anything other than what I'm working on myself.
Right.
So, light for me is there, and it's a self-perpetuating thing. So for me, I'm working on my darkness, integrating it, seeing it for what it is. And again, that's just a label, because
Right.
there are some things that some might say, well, that's kind of dark, right? Well, but is it? Because if it's serving me in some capacity, then it's actually serving the light in a way. So it's, for me, there's this thing, it has to do with the language, it has to do with all the labeling and all that, looking at things from a different perspective than the one that we've always had.
Right. For me, I want to finish with one thing here. It's interesting that Rose again has chosen this particular. She doesn't do it very often, but this particular conversation is. If she could get in the computer, she would. She's.
I see that. I love that. Thank you for
She's trying to get
joining us,
that
Rose.
close into the energetic envelope. And that's why I made a note. This is a whole different conversation, which we'll do soon. But well, someone said, if we're not labeling, because you said this is a pen, labeled a pen, right? But it's a whole much more than that. So someone said, well, but if you don't have a dictionary, if you don't have a word that you can look up what the definition of, if you don't have, how do you communicate? How do you share the different things? And this is, we'll do a whole conversation on it. But because it's frequency, you don't have to use the same word. I don't have to have have conversations with people who know anything about ascension, who know anything about multidimensionality, who know anything about anything. They just would talk the way they do and show, but they're transmitting frequency. So I can pull out something when I'm standing with someone. It can be directly with them, or
Right.
through digital technology or something, right? And I can hear them speaking. I can read their energy, and then I can pull out something that is the way that they would speak, or maybe that's a talent or something that they like. Maybe they, I don't know, maybe they like to do fishing. So I can use metaphors for something that relates to them,
Mm-hmm.
and I can use it in a way that transmits the frequency of what I'm talking about, and they go, oh yeah, I got it. So I could be having a conversation about ascension. I could have it be a conversation about consciousness or multidimensionality and not use any of those words. I'm going where they are and what their way of communicating is, and using the frequency to bridge that. So they're going, oh yeah. And then I might say, well, that's what I call playing, or that's this, or whatever it is. And so that's where we're all going, to how we communicate. We don't need, because what happens when we have a dictionary that tells us what the meaning of that word is, and then we have, the fifth version of this dictionary, or Black's Law dictionary, or the this or that. And so we can, since we're trained that that's where the meaning of the context that what you're speaking about is. So in a law or whatever it is, plain language, contracts, whatever, there's a whole range of those things. When we have the revisions, then we can just bring people, well, yeah, look it up, it's in the dictionary, right? You're looking around, so you've changed it over time because you've trained them to look there. I can't see you. and so now we're saying, well, it's on Google or it's in the dictionary or whatever, right? And so that's because it's only so if it's there. If it's not there, it's not so.
Well, we actually have had portions of specific conversation, because I feel, and no one will ever convince me otherwise, that I speak Sheila English.
Yes.
BZ speaks BZ English. Lisa speaks Lisa English. We each individually speak our own unique language. And the whole reason for that is that it is my experience of the word that I'm speaking in which I am communicating. Now, it may have mean something completely different to you.
Right.
And that is why, first of all, for me, it's almost like foundational for me that everyone really feel into the truth of that. That for me is one of those sorts of things that in a 3D level is a very real truth. For the most part, I feel truth is subjective. But in this particular case, because what we really are is a singular expression of source, and the whole point of it is to have experiences. So, of course, throughout my 58 years on this planet, I have experienced words in a particular fashion through this very specific lensing mechanism that has informed my knowing, my feeling of a particular word, which is also one of the reasons I have a lot of, I put a lot of stock in communication, not just the speaking thereof, but you guys know my propensity for wanting to eyeball the people I'm talking to, because there's a lot of communication that goes into that. Not just because you say the word, if I've said a word that you've experienced differently, I can pick up the visual cues that perhaps you've understood something in your way, not the way I meant it. And that's where a lot of misunderstanding, miscommunication, and out incorrect, a lot of arguments start that way even.
Yeah, because people are not, they're not taking that into account, and they're certainly not feeling to the frequency of what's being communicated.
Right.
Instead, they're going, I remember one of the first times to dear friends, I was talking about, well, we're all complicit. You, pointing to do that, you've been absolutely 100% complicit in the financial slavery system. And they were like, what? You need to look that word up. You don't know what that word is. No, actually, I know exactly what the word means, and I'm telling you. And it was a couple years later where we had, there wasn't 2 years between that conversation and the next one, but it was a couple years before that conversation came around, and they were like, oh yeah, you're right. We were absolutely complicit. So, because it was first of all, it was, I didn't create that. I wouldn't do that, right? Into then feeling into the frequency of that. And so that's where, well, you could say that's where we're going, although that's not accurate because we're already there, but that's where we're starting to wake up to what's going on right this minute. And that relates directly right back to the fog of consent.
Right. Well, and for me, I feel it's my responsibility where communication is concerned, because honestly, from slavery to sovereignty, banish the fog of consent. It's my responsibility to make sure that I have grokked what has been said by the person who has said it. Just because I think it's this, because that's been my experience of that word, that concept, that idea, is not necessarily the way it was meant or put across or anything else. And for me personally, is one of the reasons why questioning, having these sorts of conversations, it has been imperative for me, because I'm open to other ideas and thoughts and feelings, because I
Right.
know, right, I know that communication is skewed in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow, this was a much bigger conversation than I thought going in, by the way. But then again, it always feels like that.
This was fun. Thank you, ladies.
I know, right? Well, is there anything that either one of you would like to add to this particular conversation before we put it in the can?
No, she's just giving an exclamation point to everything we just said.
Yeah, right. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it when she comes for her visits. It's so
And she's
nice.
saying, and now would be a really good time to notice the fog.
That's right.
Yeah. So I'd like to say to everyone who is watching or who will watch this, well, who is watching, I feel like we are live because we've been going live.
I know.
Um, if you have questions, comments, of course, there's always the comments on the video itself, but there are ways to contact each one of us in the show more section of every video. If you are watching this on Conscious Conversation Central, I would love it if you would subscribe. If you're watching this on BZ Rieger's Quantum Playground channel, subscribe there, and vice versa. What I am finding a lot is there are folks who think they've been subscribed to me, to Conscious Conversation Central, and they're not. And the same thing for BZ. We, both of us, do other conversations and other videos that do not appear on each other's channels. So I would advise to make sure you are subscribed to both. Make sure to hit that notification bell if you'd like to be notified when either one of us goes live. And don't be me, make sure that your device is set to notify you as well, because that's what I found out was happening with me.
It matters.
Yes, currently you have to make sure you got it set up in both places.
Right.
Let's see, is there anything else? I guess that's it. Thanks, ladies. Oh, no, there is something. Make sure to give it a thumbs up.
There you go.
Or a thumbs down if the case may be. But I'm
yeah, follow your heart on that one.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, yes, and for that I'll say it's particularly important right now because they're starting to unlock the algorithms. You're already seeing, you can Google certain things and all of a sudden true results come up, not just the fabricated algorithm locked in results. And so as more and more people are waking up and noticing the fog, and whatever metaphor you want to use for that, they're going to use that as their thing. I know that for years and years and years on my channel, I can have 3 different tabs open to 3 different videos, same video, but in 3 different tabs in different sections of YouTube, and they're entirely different number counts on them at the same time. So they're and it's part of how I search to get it. I can, so if you feel like you like something and it's giving value to you, maybe giving you an insight, maybe it's answering a question, maybe it's putting that light bulb on for you, seemingly unrelated to what it was, but there was that spark of inspiration there. However that works for you, go ahead and do that, because then that's helpful for others who are wanting to do the same thing.
Right.
And when they make no mistake about it, it's not just the collective of those like check marks, whatever it is, right? The
Yeah.
collective of those carry your frequency in there. So that's another way to do your part to transmit things, because your frequency is now transmitting part
Very
of
good
what
point.
your expansion is.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
hadn't thought about it that way, but BZ, I
Mhm.
appreciate that, because that is so. Um, I also wanted, I'm also nudged to say here, I really haven't asked you this, BZ, but I know that Conscious Conversation Central is not a monetized channel. And I also know that there are, or it has been reported that there have been ads placed on certain channels that are not monetized. So
Mm.
I'd like to just say again, if you see an ad either at the beginning or the end of any video on Conscious Conversation Central, please reach out and let me know, because
Because I don't monetize anything.
you're not monetized either. Okay, so if you see any kind of advertising on either BZ's channel or mine, reach out to us and let us know, because it is my understanding that that has been happening specifically to channels that are not monetized. So if you see that, please let us know.
Because then, just like I was talking about the different, levels of um, uh, watched count, so how many people have watched a video or how many people have liked it, whatever it is, they can manipulate each one of those to great detail, no matter on the screen, what door, what search term you use, a whole host of things. So if they're monetizing something on a channel, if I'm looking at it for my own channel, I can't see it because they don't want me to see it, because I don't monetize anything. So it
Exactly.
would only be someone else who would alert us to let us know that, because the algorithms are such that it blocks our viewing of that. Now, maybe if I came on a totally different um, uh, instead of Firewalk Fox, I use something else, right? Um, and was not logged into my own channel, but just searching on something else, I might be able to pick it up. But it's done in a way that you can't, for that very reason.
Right. Well, I I suspect that that's exactly correct. That and I don't even think that Lisa would be able to see it. So so just if you happen to see that on either one of our channels, just reach out and let us know, because I think that's important. Um, because it's just not right, first of all. So the whole point of not being monetized is, I don't want any ads on my channel. It's not like you get to choose. If I could advertise Lisa's wire wrapping, and that would be the only thing that I could advertise, oh, I'm all for that. Or so and so's homemade candle making, I'm all for that. But that's not how that works. That's not how any of that works. And so I'm not interested in partaking in all of that. So I guess that's it. So till next time.
Much love.